No one believed this single mom could be a bodyguard. Close your eyes for just a second and picture this. A warehouse on the edge of Atlanta. Early morning. The kind of morning where the sun hasn't decided yet whether it wants to show up. Inside that warehouse, there are 23 men. Big men. Trained men. Men who've served in wars, survived combat, and spent years doing the kind of work most people only see in movies. And then the door opens, and a woman walks in. She's 34 years old. She's carrying a small bag. She's wearing clean sneakers and a navy blue jacket. She is not large. She is not imposing. She doesn't walk in like she owns the room. She walks in like she's been in the room 1,000 times before. In her mind, at least. The laughter starts almost immediately. Not all of them, but enough. Enough that she can hear it. Enough that she's supposed to feel it. She doesn't flinch. She finds a spot along the wall, sets her bag down, and begins to study the room. What I'm about to tell you is a true story. It's a story about a woman named Maya Collier, a single mother of two who worked the overnight shift at a grocery store, drove a car with a cracked windshield she couldn't afford to fix, and somehow, against every single odds stacked against her, walked into one of the most competitive private security tryouts in the country. A tryout to become the personal bodyguard of a $4 billion tech CEO. And it's a story about what happened inside that room, in a moment that lasted less than 5 seconds, that nobody who was there has ever forgotten. Now I want you to stay with me, because this isn't just a story about strength or skill or even about winning against the odds. It's a story about what happens when the world completely underestimates someone, and that someone has spent years quietly, patiently, getting ready for exactly that moment. It's a story about survival, about dignity, and about one woman who decided that the world opinion of her had absolutely nothing to do with what she was capable of. But here's what I need you to think about before we even get started. When you hear someone laugh at another person, when you see a room full of people dismiss someone before she's even had a chance to open her mouth, what does your gut tell you? Most of us have been underestimated at some point. Maybe at work, maybe by family, maybe by someone who looked at us and decided in about 3 seconds that we didn't belong. Maya Collier knew that feeling better than almost anyone, and she had one answer to it. She was going to show them. Stay with me, because the story that's coming, it gets better. And the twist, I promise you, you will not see it coming. Let's talk about what executive protection actually is, because most people have a completely wrong picture of it in their heads. They think bodyguard, and they imagine a very large man in sunglasses standing next to a celebrity. That's not what this is. Executive protection, real executive protection, is one of the most mentally demanding jobs in private security. You're not just a physical shield. You're a threat analyst, a logistician, a behavioral psychologist. You have to assess risk before it becomes danger. You have to be invisible enough that your principal, that's the person you're protecting, can live their life without feeling like they're in a war zone, while you are quietly, always operating like they are. The washout rate for serious EP tryouts? Upward of 70%. And the candidates who show up to these things are not beginners. We're talking former Army Rangers, ex-Secret Service agents, people with decades of field experience and combat medals hanging in their closets. The tryout Maya walked into was organized by a firm called Apex Shield, a boutique private security company out of Atlanta. They had a new contract, a very important client, a man named Marcus Ellison, tech founder, CEO, net worth somewhere north of $4 billion, who had recently received what investigators described as credible death threats. Apex Shield needed their best people, and so they put out the word for an open tryout. 24 candidates showed up that morning. 23 of them were exactly what you'd expect. The 24th was Maya. Before we go any further, I want to plant 3 questions in your mind. These are the questions that will answer themselves over the next hour, and the answers are not what you'd guess right now. Question 1. Why did Maya Collier, a single mom with no military background and no formal field experience, believe she had any business walking into that room? What did she know about herself that nobody else could see? Question 2. What exactly happened in those 5 seconds? What did she do that took down the most dangerous man in a room before he even understood what was happening? And question 3, and this one is the one that really got me when I heard this story. Did getting that job actually save Marcus Ellison's life? Or was it something else entirely that happened afterward? Keep those 3 questions in the back of your mind. Everything I'm about to tell you is building toward those answers. Let's go back to the beginning, all the way back to Memphis, Tennessee, to a little girl who was learning, before she even had words for it, exactly how to survive. Maya Collier grew up in a neighborhood in South Memphis that most people in Tennessee try not to think too hard about. It wasn't the worst place in the world. It had a church on every other corner and old women who grew tomatoes in their front yards and kids who played until the streetlights came on. But it also had things that no child should have to grow up navigating. Violence that came without warning. Poverty that had a way of making people mean or desperate or both. And an absence, a real, palpable absence of safety. Maya's mother left when Maya was 4. Her father was present in the way that some fathers are present. Physically there, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. By the time Maya was 7, she was being raised primarily by her grandmother, a woman named Loretta Collier, Miss Loretta, as everyone called her, a woman who was, by every account, the most quietly formidable person you'd ever meet. Miss Loretta worked 3 jobs for most of Maya's childhood. She cleaned offices at night. She did alterations out of the living room on weekends. And she kept the most immaculate front porch you've ever seen. Flowers in every season, a painted porch swing that she repainted herself every single spring. She never complained. Not once. Not in front of Maya. But Maya was watching. She was always watching. That was the thing about Maya that the people who knew her as a child remembered most. She was quiet. Not shy, quiet. There's a difference. Shy is afraid. Quiet is studying. Maya was always studying. Reading rooms. Reading people. Watching the way a person's eyes moved when they told a story that wasn't quite true. Noticing which neighbors left their lights on at the same time every night, and which ones had a new pattern that week. She didn't know why she did it. It was just how she was wired. Survival had made her observant before she even understood what observation was. She left Memphis at 22, moved to Atlanta with $200 in a secondhand suitcase, and the kind of hope that only works if you refuse to look at it too closely. She met Daniel Reeves at a cookout hosted by a mutual friend. He was funny. He had this laugh that seemed to take up the whole room, the kind of laugh that makes you want to say something funnier just to hear it again. He was ambitious, or said he was. Talked about starting a business. Talked about giving Maya a life that looked nothing like the one she'd come from. For a while it worked. They got a small apartment in East Atlanta. They got a dog, a goofy, oversized beagle mix that Maya named Captain. Maya got pregnant with their first child, a boy they named Jordan. Then 2 years later, a girl they named Amara. And then the cracks started. It began as small things. Money that didn't quite add up. Nights Daniel came home late with explanations that were technically possible but felt, in Maya's stomach, wrong. She was good at reading people, remember, and she was starting to read her husband in a way that made her feel sick. The gambling had been going on for years. Maya found that out later. It had started before they even met. Online mostly, then in person. The debt had been building in the background of their marriage like water damage behind a wall. Invisible until the wall came down. Daniel left on a Tuesday. Jordan was 5. Amara was 3. He left a note on the kitchen counter. It said he was sorry. It said he needed to figure himself out. It said, and this is the part that Maya still, to this day, says was the strangest sentence she ever read. It said, I know you'll be okay. You always are. He took the car. He left $340 in the joint account. And he was gone. $340. 2 children. 2 weeks left on the rent. Maya sat at the kitchen table for about 20 minutes. Then she got up, made breakfast for her kids, and started making phone calls. The self-defense class was Coach Ray's idea. Sort of. Maya had started using the YMCA a few months after Daniel left, mostly as an outlet. She was running, lifting, doing whatever she could to burn off the kind of rage and grief and exhaustion that you can't actually afford to show when you're a single mother who has to be functional every single day. Coach Raymond Hicks, Coach Ray to anyone who'd ever trained with him, was a retired Atlanta police officer who ran self-defense and tactical training classes out of a converted space at the back of the Y. He'd been doing it for 15 years. He'd seen a lot of students come through. He noticed Maya after about 3 weeks. Not because she was the most physically gifted student he had. She wasn't, not at first. But there was something about the way she moved when she was sparring that caught his attention. She wasn't reactive. She was predictive. While other students were responding to what was happening, Maya was responding to what was about to happen. She'd shift half a second before the attack. She'd position herself at an angle that shouldn't have made sense yet, but then it would, a moment later, become obvious. Coach Ray pulled her aside after a session one evening and asked her where she'd trained before. She told him she hadn't. Not formally. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, come back tomorrow morning. 6 o'clock. I want to show you something. That 6 o'clock session turned into 5 years of training. Krav Maga, defensive tactics, threat assessment, situational awareness drills that involved Maya memorizing the layout of a room in under 10 seconds and then describing it with her eyes closed. Scenario simulations. First aid certification. Low light navigation. She did all of it. After her shifts at the grocery store, before she picked up her kids, on weekends when Miss Loretta drove up from Memphis to watch Jordan and Amara. But here's the part that most people don't know about. About 2 years into her training, Coach Ray introduced her to someone, a woman named Claire Ashford. Retired, quiet, late 50s. She drove a sensible car and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and looked, honestly, like someone's favorite librarian. Claire Ashford had spent 27 years working for the Central Intelligence Agency. She had spent her career in the field. Threat analysis, human behavior profiling, protective intelligence, which is the discipline of identifying threats before they materialize. She had, as she put it to Maya on the day they met, spent 3 decades watching people in order to understand what they were going to do before they understood it themselves. She and Maya trained together for almost 3 years. And what Claire gave Maya, the vocabulary, the framework, the methodology for what Maya had always done instinctively, was the final piece. It was Claire who eventually said to Maya, and I want you to remember this sentence because it matters later, you don't react to threats. You see them coming. That is not a skill I can teach. I can only help you understand what you already have. Maya found the Apex Shield Tryout posting on a corkboard at Coach Ray's gym on a Thursday afternoon. It was a small flyer, printed on regular paper, half hidden behind a flyer for a yoga class. She stood in front of it for a long time. Then she took a photo of it on her phone. Then she went and picked up her kids. She didn't apply that night, or the next night. It took her 4 more days to fill out the application, because something in her kept saying, this is not a world that wants you. Why walk into a room full of people who will laugh at you? And then she thought about Miss Loretta, and her 3 jobs, and her painted porch swing, and the way she never complained. Not once. and Maya hit submit. The morning of the tryout, Maya woke up at 4:15. She made pancakes, Jordan's favorite. She packed their bags for school, double-checked Amara's homework folder, and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the kind of stillness that only comes when you've decided something completely. She dropped the kids at her neighbor Mrs. Patterson's house before sunrise. Mrs. Patterson was 71 years old and had been in Maya's corner since the week Daniel left. She took one look at Maya that morning, the quiet in her eyes, the set of her jaw, and just nodded. Didn't say a word. Just pulled both kids inside and gave Maya a look that said, "Go. We're fine here." Maya drove 45 minutes through Atlanta traffic, through neighborhoods that were just beginning to wake up. She had the radio off. She wasn't listening to anything. She was running through the morning in her mind, not fantasizing, not rehearsing lines, just being present, already arriving. The facility was a converted warehouse in an industrial district near the airport. She found it without GPS. She'd driven the route twice the week before, just to know it, just to remove one variable. She was the second person to arrive. She sat in her car for 12 minutes, watching candidates pull into the lot, counting them, noting the way each one moved when they got out of their vehicle, already reading the room before the room had started. She walked in at 7:53. The tryout was scheduled to begin at 8. The interior of the warehouse had been set up with clinical efficiency. A check-in table near the entrance, a large open floor with marked assessment zones, equipment lined up along one wall. It smelled like rubber matting and industrial cleaning fluid and something that might have been adrenaline. 22 men were already inside. One more arrived behind Maya. The room noticed her immediately. She felt it, not with anxiety, but with the kind of cool recognition that comes when you've been expecting something and it shows up exactly on time. The glances, the double takes, the murmuring that passes between strangers who've just been given a shared reaction. She found a spot along the far wall, away from the clusters of men who were already establishing dominance through proximity to each other, and she set her bag down and stood with her back to the wall. Not because she was afraid, because standing with your back to a wall gives you a clear sight line to the entire room. She knew that. It was automatic. The loudest voice came from the far side of the room. His name was Derek Walsh. She didn't know that yet, but she'd find it out within the next 20 minutes, because Derek Walsh was the kind of man who made sure everyone in a room knew his name. He said something to the man standing next to him. He said it at full volume. He said, and I'll keep this close to the actual phrasing, but cleaned up. He said something to the effect of, "Did she take a wrong turn on the way to the daycare?" The laughter came from maybe 6 or 7 of the men. Not all of them. Some of them looked at the floor. One of them, a compact, serious-looking man near the front, looked at Maya with an expression that was not unkind. Just watching. Just waiting. Maya did not respond. She did not look at Derek Walsh. She looked at the room, and she saw what she came to see. She already knew, in those first 7 minutes, which 3 candidates were the real competition. She already knew that Derek Walsh telegraphed his aggression with his left shoulder. It dropped about 1/4 of an inch before he committed to a movement. She already knew that the coordinator, a graying, precise man named Harris who stood at the front of the room with a clipboard and the posture of someone who'd spent years in federal law enforcement. She already knew that Harris had noticed her too. Not with amusement, with attention. At 8 o'clock exactly, Harris called the room to order, and the tryout began. Stage 1 was physical fitness assessment, timed run, push-ups, pull-ups, functional strength tests, the kind of stage designed to eliminate people quickly and efficiently. Maya was not first in anything during stage 1. She was not trying to be. She was trying to be exactly good enough to clear every threshold with something spare without drawing unnecessary attention. She had thought about this deliberately. Spending yourself in stage 1 meant you had less for what came after. She knew what came after. She finished stage 1 in the middle of the pack. The laughing had quieted somewhat. You couldn't finish that course the way she did and still be dismissed as a joke. But the commentary hadn't stopped entirely. Beneath the surface, it was still there. The whispers, the barely concealed disbelief that she was still in the room. She didn't care. Not because she'd suppressed the reaction to it, but because she was genuinely too focused to give it any real space in her mind. Every ounce of attention she had was going toward what was coming. Stage 2 was a tactical scenario simulation, a mock environment, a staged hotel lobby, essentially, where candidates were given a principle to protect and a scenario that escalated with increasing threats. The assessment was on decision-making under pressure, speed and accuracy of threat identification, communication, positioning. This was where Harris made his first note about Maya. 2 of the ex-military candidates, both highly trained, both well-regarded coming in, missed what the scenario architect called Threat Vector 3. It was a deliberate blind spot in the scenario design, a secondary threat planted in a position that required you to be thinking about the room as a whole rather than just reacting to the primary disturbance. Maya caught it in under 4 seconds. She repositioned herself to cover both vectors simultaneously while communicating the secondary threat to her designated backup. It was textbook protective intelligence. It was exactly what Claire Ashford had spent 3 years teaching her to do. Harris circled something on his clipboard. Stage 3 was a psychological assessment and interview. Short, pointed. Harris asked questions that seemed simple on the surface and were designed to reveal character under pressure. Things like, tell me about a time you were wrong and didn't know it immediately. Or, what would you do if you disagreed with a direct order that you believed put the principal at greater risk? Maya answered every question the same way she moved through a room. Directly, without performance, without trying to give the answer she thought they wanted. Harris made more notes. And then came stage 4. Stage 4 was close combat response. The premise was simple. Each candidate would face a designated aggressor. That aggressor was Derek Walsh in a controlled scenario. The brief was this: neutralize the threat. Protect the principal. Time limit, 30 seconds. One by one, candidates went in. Derek was very good. He was controlled, fast, technically precise, and he had the particular quality that made him genuinely dangerous. He was comfortable with violence. Not wild. Comfortable. There's a difference. Wild you can read. Comfortable is harder. Most candidates lasted between 8 and 15 seconds before Derek had them neutralized. A few made it closer to 20. One made it the full 30, and that candidate looked like he'd survived a car accident on the other side. When Maya's name was called, Derek Walsh turned to the room. He made a show of rolling his shoulders. He did a small, exaggerated bow in Maya's direction. Someone laughed. Maya walked to the center of the floor and took her position. She had been watching Derek Walsh for 3.5 hours. She had watched him in the scenario simulations. She had watched him while he waited. She had watched his resting posture, his reactive posture, the way his weight shifted when he was about to move, the micro drop in his left shoulder that came a fraction of a second before his dominant hand committed. She had watched the way he breathed. She knew exactly what he was going to do. Harris said, begin. Derek moved. Left shoulder dropped, right on schedule. Maya didn't move backward. She moved forward and slightly left, into the inside of his reach, where his power couldn't follow. 2 steps. One redirect of his arm, using his own momentum. A precise and targeted pressure point strike to the inside of his wrist. The kind of technique that doesn't require strength, only precision and exact knowledge of where the nerve cluster sits. His grip disengaged involuntarily. His body turned with the force, and Maya was behind him. one arm across his center of gravity. Principal covered. Threat neutralized. The stopwatch on Harris's wrist said 4 seconds and 83 milliseconds. The room was completely silent. Not the polite silence of people who are being respectful. The involuntary silence of people whose brains are trying to process something that doesn't fit any category they had prepared for. Derek Walsh straightened up slowly. He looked at Maya. He did not laugh. He did not say anything. He gave her a single nod, the kind of nod that means, "I understand now," and he stepped back. Harris looked at his clipboard for a long moment. Then he looked at Maya. He said, "Thank you, Ms. Collier. That will be all for today. We'll be in touch." Maya picked up her bag, walked to the door, drove home, picked up her kids, and then she waited. The candidates who were at that tryout talked about what they saw in the days that followed. The way things like that travel, privately, man-to-man, through phone calls and messages, is its own kind of testament to how significant it was. A former Marine named Torres, who had been in that room, later described it this way. It wasn't just that she was fast. Plenty of people are fast. It was that she'd already solved the problem before it started. The rest of us were in there, trying to win. She'd already won before she took her first step. Another candidate, a man with 15 years in Federal Protective Services, said that what Maya demonstrated in Stage 2 and Stage 4 together was the combination that actual high-level protective work requires. Physical capacity is table stakes. What separates a good agent from a great one is the ability to process an environment in real time and act on information before it becomes a crisis. He said he'd seen agents with 20 years of field experience who couldn't do what Maya did in that scenario room. Harris had submitted his recommendation within 48 hours of the tryout. Maya Collier, top candidate. Not top female candidate. Top candidate. Full stop. And then the phone call came. Not to Maya. The phone call came to Harris, from the director of Apex Shield. And it was not the phone call Harris had been expecting to make. Marcus Ellison, the CEO, had included a specification in his contract brief. It was buried in the language about principal preferences and operational parameters, but it was there. He had requested, and had been granted, a stipulation that his personal protection detail consist of male agents only. The reasoning, as it was communicated to Harris, was that Marcus Ellison traveled internationally, including to regions where a female agent might create cultural friction that could complicate the protective mission. The argument was framed as operational. Practical, nothing personal. Harris pushed back. He presented the assessment data. He presented the Stage 2 scenario scores and the Stage 4 time. He made the case in plain terms that the best candidate for the job was Maya Collier, and that rejecting her on the basis of gender was both a professional error and something he was personally uncomfortable with. The director held firm, and so Maya received a phone call on a Wednesday afternoon. She was on her lunch break, sitting in her car in the grocery store parking lot, informing her that she had not been selected to move forward. No specific reason was given. She thanked the person on the phone. She finished her lunch. She went back inside and worked the rest of her shift. She called Coach Ray that evening. She told him what happened. There was a long pause on his end of the line. Then he said, "You did everything right. You know that." She said, "I know." And then she said something that he later told me was the moment he realized Maya Collier was built differently than most people he'd ever trained. She said, "It's not over. I don't know what that means yet, but I know it's not over." Life continued, the way it does. Maya worked her shifts, took her kids to school, kept training, not obsessively, not out of anger, just because training was now part of who she was. As natural as eating, as natural as breathing. She picked up extra work wherever she could. Event catering had come through a friend. It paid better than the overnight grocery shift and had more flexible hours, which helped with the kids' schedule. She'd been doing event work for a few months by the time October came around. In early October, she got a booking for a charity gala. A big one. A fundraiser at a hotel in downtown Atlanta. Black tie, 200 guests, catering staff of about 30 people. She almost didn't take it. It conflicted with a parent-teacher conference that she had to reschedule. But the money was good, and she needed it for Amara's school field trip. So she took it. She had no idea who the event was for. She hadn't read the guest list. She was there to carry trays and fill glasses and do her job professionally and go home. She arrived at 6. She went through staff orientation. She was assigned to the main room, the largest ballroom, working the east side near the secondary entrance. At 8:15, the guests began to arrive. At 8:30, Maya looked up from the tray she was arranging and saw a face she recognized. Marcus Ellison walked into the room with his protection detail. Now I want you to understand something about how Maya's mind works. When she recognized Marcus Ellison, she didn't think, this is fate. She didn't think about the tryout or the rejection or any of the emotion attached to either of those things. None of that entered her mind. What entered her mind was, I am now in a room with a man who has credible death threats against him. I know his protection detail is the one deployed from the tryout I attended, and I need to assess this room right now. That was it. That was the entirety of her mental response. She continued working, but she was also, and she could not have turned this off if she tried, she was reading the room. 200 guests, 40 staff, 8 exits. She counted them within her first 15 minutes before she even consciously decided to. The protection detail was 4 agents. She recognized one of them from the tryout, not Derek Walsh, a different one. She noted their positioning. She noted the gaps. There was a gap on the east side of the room, her side, near the secondary entrance she'd been assigned to. The coverage was thin there, not catastrophically thin, but thin in the way that becomes a problem if something goes wrong near that entrance. She made a mental note, kept working. At 9:45, her earpiece crackled. Not her earpiece. She didn't have one. But one of the detail agents, the one she'd recognized, was standing about 15 feet away from her when his earpiece crackled and his posture changed. She saw it before he moved. That micro shift, the one that means something just changed in the threat assessment. He moved toward the main entrance, and Maya looked toward the secondary entrance. And there was a man standing there who was not a guest and was not staff, and whose body language was so clearly, unmistakably wrong that she felt it in her chest before her brain had finished the analysis. She set her tray down on the nearest table. She didn't run. Running creates panic. Panic is its own threat multiplier. She walked quickly, directly, with complete calm, to where Marcus Ellison was standing with 2 other guests, mid-conversation, completely unaware. She said in a low, even voice, "Sir, I need you to come with me right now. Please don't react. Just walk with me." Marcus Ellison had enough situational awareness, and honestly, enough fear already living in the back of his mind, that he responded immediately. He excused himself from the conversation. He walked with her. She moved him through the service door on the south wall, the one she'd identified in her first assessment of the room as the cleanest exit if the main and secondary entrances were compromised. She placed him in the corridor behind the kitchen. She stood at the door. She kept him behind her. The detail agents reached the secondary entrance 40 seconds later. The individual was detained by hotel security. The threat was resolved. Marcus Ellison was standing in a service corridor, behind a woman in a catering uniform, and he was completely unharmed. One of the detail agents came through the kitchen door about 2 minutes later and stopped cold when he saw Maya. He stared at her for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, "You're the candidate from the tryout." She said, "Is the principal secure?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Then we're good." Marcus Ellison asked who she was before he left that corridor. The agent told him. Ellison asked what she meant. She was at a tryout? For what? The agent explained. The Apex Shield tryout. Maya Collier, Harris's top-ranked candidate. Not selected. Gender clause in the contract brief. Marcus Ellison stood in that service corridor for a moment and didn't say anything. Then he said, "Get me Harris on the phone." Then he looked at Maya and said, "I owe you an apology, and I owe you a conversation." Maya looked at him with the same expression she'd worn in that warehouse in July. Steady, unreadable, already 3 steps ahead. She said, "I'm available Thursday." The meeting happened on a Thursday morning, as promised. A conference room in a glass building in Midtown Atlanta. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of office that exists in a different economic universe than the grocery store parking lot where Maya had eaten her lunch the day she got rejected. Marcus Ellison was already in the room when she arrived. Harris was there too. The Apex Shield director was not. Ellison started by saying, "I won't be direct with you. The clause in my contract brief was mine. I asked for it, and I was wrong to ask for it, and I want you to know that I understand that." Maya said, "Thank you for saying that." Ellison offered her the position. Lead personal protection officer. Full-time. A salary she had not imagined seeing attached to her name for at least another decade. Benefits. A career pathway. All of it. Maya listened to the entire offer. And then she said, "I have one condition." Ellison said, "Name it." She said, "I need your contract with Apex Shield and any security firm you work with going forward to remove gender-based restrictions from their candidate briefs. In writing. As a condition of my employment." Ellison looked at Harris. Harris said nothing. He was looking at Maya with the expression of someone watching a thing they had hoped would happen. Ellison said, "Done. I'll have legal draft the language today." They shook hands. Maya went home, made dinner, helped Jordan with his math homework, and told her kids that things are going to be a little different soon. In a good way. Then she called Miss Loretta. And Miss Loretta, who had raised this woman on 3 jobs and a painted porch swing and a lifetime of quiet, unshakable strength. Miss Loretta started crying. And Maya started crying. And apparently Captain the Beagle started barking because Jordan had let him in from the yard, and for a few minutes the whole apartment was joyful chaos. The contract language change was quiet. It didn't make news. That wasn't the point. But things moved the way things do when someone with leverage decides to use it correctly. 3 private security firms updated their candidate brief policies within the following year. Not because they were forced to, because Ellison's contract was a model that other clients started requesting. The language spread. Coach Ray launched a formal executive protection training program. The first in Atlanta, specifically designed to develop candidates who came from non-traditional backgrounds. People like Maya. People with gifts that the standard pipeline had no way to identify or cultivate. He called the threat assessment and behavioral profiling module the Collier Protocol, because that was what it was. Claire Ashford, the retired CIA officer who'd spent 3 years training Maya in a spare room above a boxing gym. She started getting calls from EP firms who'd heard about her methods. She took on 4 more students in the following year. 2 of them placed in the top 3 at major tryouts. And Maya? Maya has been with Marcus Ellison's protective detail for going on 2 years. She's been in situations she can't and won't talk about. She's done her job. Quietly, effectively, without drama. She bought Miss Loretta a house in Memphis. 3 bedrooms, a front porch, flowers in every season, a porch swing that Miss Loretta painted herself, the same white she's always used in the spring after she moved in. Nobody laughs at Maya Collier anymore, not because she made them stop, but because they understand now what she understood about herself all along. Maya said something once in a conversation with Coach Ray, not in an interview, not for public consumption, that he shared with me with her permission. She said, "People laughed because they saw what I looked like. They never stopped to ask what I'd survived." And survival, real survival, the kind where you get up every day and you just keep going because the alternative is failing the people who need you, that teaches you things that no training program in the world can replicate. She said, "I was never trying to prove anything to them. I was just trying to do what I knew I could do. The proving was almost beside the point." I've thought about that a lot since I heard this story. The idea that someone can walk into a room full of people who've already decided she doesn't belong and not be trying to change their minds, not be fueled by their disbelief, just doing what she knows she can do and letting the reality of it speak for itself.